Caleb, you didn't actually think I loved you, did you? Victoria's cigarette smoke ghosted across my face. If you weren't a dead ringer for Julian, do you really think a broke college kid like you would have ever stepped foot in my family's world? I pretended to fight back tears, my eyes red-rimmed, while I was actually counting down the seconds in my head. 2 hours later, a notification for a $15 million wire transfer lit up my phone. I tossed the debit card she'd given me, the one with a $500,000 parting gift on it, straight into the trash can. Screw being a stand-in. I was on my way to pick up the girl who'd waited 8 years for me. Hannah, I'm coming. Just as the sweat was starting to cool after an intense workout, Victoria Vance lay sprawled on my chest, breathing heavily. Strands of her perfect blonde hair stuck to her neck, but her eyes were as cold as ice. Caleb, we're done. My hand was still resting on the small of her back. My muscles seized, not because I was hurt, but because I couldn't fucking help but laugh. This scene was playing out 3 days ahead of the system schedule. Seeing no reaction from me, Victoria pushed my arm away and sat up. The silk nightgown slipped down to her waist, but she didn't seem to care. She grabbed a pack of slender cigarettes from the nightstand, shook one out, and lit it with a sharp click of her lighter. Julian's back. She took a long drag, the smoke curling from her ruby-red lips. You know, he's the only one I've ever really wanted. I stared at the crystal chandelier on the ceiling, forcing a tremor of hurt into my voice. So what was I? What were the last 2 years? What were they? She let out a short, bitter laugh, flicking ash onto the priceless Persian rug. Caleb, you didn't actually think I loved you, did you? You look so much like him, about 70%, especially the way your head tilts when you smile. If it weren't for that, did you really think a broke college kid like you could ever get through the door of my penthouse? The words were designed to kill. If I were the same naive kid I was when I first met her, they might have. But right now, all I could see was the countdown timer on the system's interface, a projection only I could see. Time remaining until mission completion and disbursement of $15 million prize. 2 hours. So, I was just a substitute from the start? I made my voice crack, but under the duvet, my fingers were digging into the sheets, calculating how long it would take to get to the airport to pick up my childhood sweetheart, Hannah Reed. Her flight was landing at 3 o'clock this afternoon. What else? Victoria snuffed out her cigarette and slipped on a silk robe. There's a cashier's check for you in the study downstairs. $500,000. Consider it severance pay. I want you gone by the end of the day. She paused at the bedroom door, not turning back. Oh, and don't even think about causing trouble for Julian. You can't afford it. The moment the door clicked shut, I shot out of bed and rushed to the floor-to-ceiling window, pulling back a sliver of the curtain. As Victoria's Tesla exited the underground garage, I jumped in the air 3 times, nearly punching a hole through the floor. System, did it come through? Is the money here? Ding, mission complete. Host has successfully been dumped by the target following the return of her old flame. System integrity was not compromised. No retaliatory actions were taken against the target. A reward of $15 million has been transferred to the designated account. The electronic voice faded just as my phone buzzed with a notification from my banking app. I opened it. The long string of zeros after the comma nearly blinded me. I crouched on the floor, covering my mouth as I laughed until tears streamed down my face. 2 years. 2 years of pretending to be docile, pretending to be infatuated, pretending Victoria Vance was my entire world. I sat through art exhibits she had zero interest in, listened to her complain endlessly about her vapid trust fund friends, and had to act jealous, but too insecure to say anything whenever she'd stare wistfully at some old photo of her and Julian. And now I was free. It took me 30 minutes to pack. There wasn't much to pack, really. I'd moved into this Gold Coast penthouse with a single suitcase 2 years ago. The only things I'd acquired since were a few designer outfits Victoria had bought on a whim and the watch she gave me. A gift for me, but a near-exact replica of one Julian used to wear. I tossed all of it into a trash bag, along with the $500,000 check. It wasn't that I had too much pride. It was just unnecessary. What's $500,000 compared to 15? A rounding error. Besides, if I took her money, what were the chances she'd use it as leverage to bother me later? Right now, all I wanted was to take my money and find Hannah Reed. Hannah was my childhood sweetheart, the one who truly held my heart. We grew up together in the old brick walk-ups of Ravenswood, and she was always trailing behind me, yelling, "Caleb, Wait up. Then her parents' business took them overseas, and they took her with them. It's been 8 years. Last year, she told me her family's business had hit a rough patch, and they were thinking of moving back to the States. My heart nearly burst. But at the time, I was only a few months into this insane system contract. The system's offer was simple. Make Victoria Vance fall for me, then get ruthlessly dumped the moment her one true love came back into the picture, and I'd get $15 million. And Victoria Vance. She was a notorious heiress. Beautiful, yes, but with a famously foul temper and eyes only for her long-lost love, Julian Croft, who it turned out wasn't so lost after all. Back then, I thought it's just acting, right? For $15 million for the chance to give Hannah a stable and happy life, I could play any part. Now, the show was over. The money was in my account, and Hannah was back. Life felt perfect. I dragged my original suitcase out of the penthouse. The doorman gave me a strange look. He was probably used to seeing me bow and scrape around Victoria, so my clean, sharp exit must have seemed out of character. I didn't care what he thought. I hailed an Uber and headed straight for O'Hare. On the way, I sent Hannah a message on WhatsApp. Frowny face landed yet. I'm coming to get you. She replied almost instantly with a smiley face. Frowny face, just got my bags. Waiting for you by the exit. Smiley face. I couldn't wipe the grin off my face. I spotted her before I even reached the arrival's curb. She was wearing a simple white t-shirt and jeans, her hair in a high ponytail, a canvas tote bag slung over her shoulder. She stood out from the crowd, looking around curiously. The sunlight streaming through the terminal's glass walls seemed to wrap her in a golden glow. She hadn't changed a bit. I walked faster, coming up behind her and calling her name softly. Hannah. She spun around. The moment she saw me, her eyes lit up. Caleb. She ran and threw her arms around me, squeezing so tight I could barely breathe. I could smell the familiar, clean scent of her shampoo, exactly as I remembered it. You're so thin. She pulled back, pinching my arm with a concerned frown. Have you not been eating right? I've been fine, just a little busy lately. I smiled, ruffling her hair, just like I used to when we were kids. Never mind that. Where are your bags? Let me get them. Over there. She pointed to 2 large suitcases a few feet away. I told my mom it was too much, but she insisted I couldn't get these brands back home and just kept packing. I lifted the suitcases, feeling their weight. They were heavy. Sounds like your mom. Tell me about it. Hannah chattered away as she walked beside me. So, how have you been these past 2 years? My aunt mentioned you got a girlfriend. The mention of Victoria stirred nothing in me but a faint sense of amusement. We broke up. What, when? Hannah looked at me, surprised. Why? Everything seemed fine. This morning, I loaded the bags into the trunk of the Uber and held the door open for her. The guy she's always been obsessed with came back, so the stand-in was no longer needed. Hannah froze. After I got in the car, she asked cautiously, Are you okay? I turned to look at her. Her eyes were wide with worry, like a startled rabbit's. I couldn't help but laugh. Okay, I'm thrilled. Huh. The woman had a terrible temper, spent money like it was water, and was always comparing me to her ex. If I hadn't been, I almost mentioned the system, but caught myself. If I hadn't been completely blind at the time, I would have ended it ages ago. Hannah still looked confused, but seeing that I was genuinely happy, she visibly relaxed. Well, good. I'm glad you broke up. I never thought she was right for you. See, you've always had the best judgment, I said, playfully ruffling her hair again. As the Uber pulled away from the airport, I watched the city skyline glide past, my mind already racing. First, I'd take Hannah to that old-school diner she loved as a kid. Then we'd walk through the old neighborhood. And finally, we needed a place to stay. We couldn't live in hotels, and I didn't want Hannah bouncing around with me. Hey, Hannah, where are you planning on staying now that you're back? I asked. My parents bought a condo for me downtown in the South Loop. I haven't even seen it yet, so I have no idea what it's like. Perfect. After we eat, I'll go with you to check it out. Help you get settled. Okay. Hannah beamed, her eyes curving into crescent moons. Looking at her smile, I knew that every second of the last 2 years had been worth it. Over burgers and milkshakes at the diner, Hannah told me all about her life abroad. She complained about the bland food, talked about how her parents' business went from thriving to struggling, and confessed how much she missed the simple, lively energy of our Chicago neighborhood. Honestly, I wanted to come back for a long time, she said, sipping her milkshake. I always felt like I was just floating over there, never really grounded. Well, you're back now. I slid the plate, with her onion rings closer to her. You can put down roots here. I've got you. She looked up, her eyes shining, a faint blush on her cheeks. Yeah. After we finished, I went to pay the bill. The owner, Maria, was the same woman who'd run the place for 30 years. She saw us, and her face broke into a wide smile. Caleb and Hannah, look at you. I haven't seen you two together in years. Hannah, you're all grown up. Hi, Maria, Hannah said sweetly. It's so good to see you, Maria beamed. You know, I always said you two were inseparable. Now, Caleb's a man in your back. You two better not waste any time. Hannah's blush deepened, and she ducked her head, pretending to be intensely focused on the last sip of her shake. I just smiled. We'll keep that in mind, Maria. From the diner, we walked over to Ravenswood. The streets were the same, lined with old brick buildings, though many had been newly renovated. The massive sycamore tree we used to climb was still there, its branches creating a thick canopy over the sidewalk. Remember this? Hannah pointed to a scar on the trunk. You tried to get to a bird's nest for me, fell, and had to get stitches right above your eyebrow. How could I forget? I touched the faint scar. You were so scared you started sobbing, said you were going to run and get a doctor, but you ended up getting lost yourself. My mom had to come find you. I did not. She mumbled, scratching her head in embarrassment. I was just worried. We walked slowly down the familiar streets. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, dappling the pavement. The air smelled of home-cooked meals and sounded of neighbors chatting on their stoops. It was all so warm and familiar. I stopped suddenly. Hannah, there's something I need to tell you. What is it? She asked, looking at me. I took a deep breath. I'm rich now. Not just a little bit of money. I have enough for both of us to live comfortably for the rest of our lives. Hannah stared, her eyes wide. Caleb, how did you get so much money? You didn't do anything. What are you thinking? I laughed, tapping her gently on the head. It's all legitimate. It's related to my ex-girlfriend. She broke up with me and gave me a very generous severance package. It's more than enough for us. I didn't tell her about the system, not because I didn't trust her, but because the whole story was so bizarre she'd never believe it. The money was real, and that's what mattered. Hannah still looked skeptical, but she didn't press. She just nodded slowly. Oh, so, I said, looking directly into her eyes. Hannah, I'm in love with you. I have been since we were kids. I never said anything because I was broke and felt like I couldn't give you anything. But now I can. I can give you a happy life. Will you be my girlfriend? Her eyes immediately filled with tears. She bit her lip, and after a long moment, she nodded fiercely, her voice choked with emotion. Yes, Caleb. Of course, yes. I've always wanted you to ask. I pulled her into a tight hug, my heart feeling full to bursting. The sun was warm, a gentle breeze was blowing, the girl I loved was in my arms, and I had more money than I knew what to do with. As for Victoria Vance and her long-lost love, who gives a damn? After Hannah and I officially got together, the first thing I did was buy a place. Nothing too shabby, but not too flashy either. Given my sudden change in fortune, it felt smarter to keep a low profile. A realtor showed me a few places, and I settled on a high-end condo in River North, just a 10-minute walk from Hannah's family's new place. The building had great amenities, tight security, and, best of all, a balcony with a panoramic view of the city skyline. When I signed the papers, the realtor stared at me like I was some kind of crypto lottery winner. I guess a young guy in a hoodie paying cash for a multi-million-dollar condo, without even blinking, would raise some eyebrows. I ignored him, paid, took the keys, and moved my stuff in that day. Not that there was much to move. Just my old suitcase, a few changes of clothes, and a bag of marbles Hannah had given me for my 10th birthday. That evening, I texted her, frowny face, are you free for dinner tomorrow night? She replied instantly, frowny face, yes. What are we eating? I'll take you somewhere nice. I chose Aria, a French restaurant on the near north side. The name was a bit generic, but the food and ambience were impeccable. Easily one of the top restaurants in the city. I'd been there a few times with Victoria. Every time, she'd look around with a dismissive air and complain that it wasn't as authentic as some place in Paris. Back then, I'd have to smile and agree, while thinking, then why don't you just fly to Paris and eat there? But this was different. I was taking someone I loved, What we ate or where we ate didn't matter. All that mattered was who I was with. The next afternoon, I waited for Hannah outside her building. She came out wearing a pale blue sundress and a touch of makeup. Standing in the sunlight, she was so beautiful it took my breath away. "What is it? Does it look bad?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious, tugging at the hem of her dress. "It looks perfect. You look perfect." I walked over and took her hand. "Let's go eat." Her hand was soft and warm, completely different from Victoria's, which were always cool to the touch and manicured with some dark, intimidating nail polish. At the restaurant, the maitre d' greeted us politely. I gave him my reservation name, and he led us to our table. The lighting was dim, a soft piano melody played in the background, and each table was separated by elegant screens, offering a great deal of privacy. Our table was by a large window. As soon as we sat down, Hannah looked around in awe. "Caleb, this place must be really expensive." "Don't worry about it. Just enjoy." I smiled, handing her a menu. "Order whatever you want." "Seriously." She took the menu and let out a tiny gasp, probably after seeing the prices. I paid her no mind, picking up my own menu to find a few things I knew she'd like. Just then, a familiar, saccharine voice drifted from behind the screen next to us. "Julian, darling, how's the foie gras? Isn't it even better than that place we went to in London?" It was Victoria. The menu in my hands felt suddenly heavy. Hannah heard it too and looked up at me, her brow furrowed in confusion. I gave her a small smile, trying to signal that it was nothing, but my ears were glued to the conversation next door. Another male voice, smooth but with a hint of detachment, replied, "It's fine." Julian Croft. I scoffed internally. It seemed the happy couple wasn't having such a great time after all. Julian's tone was anything but enthusiastic. Hannah whispered, "Is that your ex-girlfriend?" "Yeah," I nodded, "with the love of her life. Should we move? Or maybe we should just go to another restaurant?" Hannah asked, looking uncomfortable. "Why should we move?" I took her hand. "We'll have our dinner. What they do is none of our business. Besides, I booked this table first. If anyone should move, it's them." I raised my voice just enough to make sure they could hear me on the other side of the screen. Sure enough, their conversation stopped. A few seconds later, Victoria's voice, laced with anger, snapped. "Who's being so loud out there?" A waiter, who happened to be walking by, immediately apologized. "My apologies, Ms. Vance. The guests at the next table were a bit loud. I'll go have a word." "Don't bother." Julian's voice cut in again. "Let them eat." Victoria sounded displeased, but didn't say anything more. I winked at Hannah, who giggled, the tension in her shoulders finally easing. "So, what looks good? Let me order for you. I'll have the cream of mushroom soup and the steak medium well." "You got it." I relayed her order to the waiter, adding a few of the restaurant's signature dishes and a bottle of red wine. "Is that enough? We can always order more." No, that's plenty. We'll never finish all that." After the waiter left, Hannah still seemed a bit on edge, glancing towards the screen every so often. "Ignore them," I said, pouring her a glass of water. "Let's talk about us. Tell me something fun you did while you were away." She finally relaxed and began telling me stories. About the time she went to the opera and misunderstood the etiquette, about finding an authentic noodle shop in a European Chinatown and nearly crying with joy, and about how she'd spend lonely nights making instant ramen while her parents work around the clock. 15, I listened intently, chiming in here and there. Time always flew when I was with Hannah, and before we knew it, our food arrived. "Try the steak," I said, cutting a piece and holding out for her. "They make it perfectly here." She blushed, but opened her mouth and took the bite. Her eyes sparkled. "Wow, that's delicious. Way better than any steak I had overseas." "Of course it is. Look who brought you here," I said with a cocky grin. We were laughing when a loud crash came from the next table, like a glass shattering. It was followed by Victoria's voice, thick with suppressed rage. "Julian, what the hell is your problem?" Julian's voice was flat, emotionless. "I don't have a problem." "No problem? Then what were you just staring at? Were you looking at Caleb? Are you still thinking about him?" Victoria's voice grew louder. Hannah and I both put down our forks and stared at each other. What was she even talking about? Was she delusional? Julian sounded like he was losing his patience, his voice turning cold. "Victoria, can you please stop being so irrational?" "I'm being irrational?" Victoria shrieked. I've told you 1,000 times. He was just a substitute. He can't compare to you. And you're still looking at him. Are you trying to tell me I have terrible taste? I frowned. The woman was completely unhinged. 16, Hannah tugged on my sleeve. Caleb, maybe we should just go. Nope, I said, patting her hand reassuringly. We haven't finished eating. I was going to sit right here and see just how ugly this train wreck could get. The argument next door continued, mostly with Victoria accusing Julian of not loving her enough and Julian accusing her of being too dramatic. It was the same old story, nothing new. Halfway through the meal, I excused myself to use the restroom. On my way back, I ran right into Julian in the hallway. He looked thinner than in the photos, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit with a cool, detached air about him. I could see why Victoria was so obsessed. He saw me and froze for a second, then gave a slight nod, a silent acknowledgement. I had no intention of speaking to him and started to walk past. But as I did, he spoke. Are you serious about her? I stopped and turned back. None of your damn business. He didn't get angry. He just said quietly, Victoria, she's actually quite pitiful, you know? Pitiful. I laughed. She used me as a placeholder for 2 years and is now living her dream with you. How is she pitiful? What does that make me? That's not what I meant. I don't care what you meant, I said, looking him straight in the eye. Control your girlfriend. Tell her to stop acting like a lunatic in public. Without waiting for a reply, I turned and walked away. 17, when I got back to the table, Hannah was looking at me with concern. Is everything okay? Everything's fine. I sat down, sliding a plate with a slice of chocolate lava cake toward her. Here, eat this. We'll leave as soon as we're done. She nodded, taking small, delicate bites. The table next to us had fallen silent, probably exhausted from their fight. I put them out of my mind and focused on enjoying the rest of the dinner with Hannah. When I went to pay, the waiter informed me that the gentleman at the next table had already taken care of our bill. I frowned and asked him to return the money. I wasn't trying to be difficult. I just wanted nothing more to do with them. The waiter looked uncomfortable and explained that Mr. Croft had insisted. I thought about it for a moment and decided not to argue. Fine. I consider it compensation for 2 years of emotional distress. Outside, the evening air was cool. I took off my jacket and draped it over Hannah's shoulders. She looked up at me. Caleb, what did you and that Julian guy talk about? Nothing, I said, taking her hand as we walked. Just nonsense. You know. Hannah hesitated. I don't think Victoria is actually in love with him. Oh, why do you say that? The way she talks to him. It sounds like she's trying too hard, a little desperate. It's not how you act when you really love someone. She trailed off, blushing again. That's just my opinion. I stopped and looked at her, my heart swelling with warmth. Hannah was always so observant. Her love for Julian wasn't love. It was an obsession. He was the one that got away, the prize she could never have. Now that she had him, it was more about holding on to a trophy than cherishing a person. And Julian? He probably felt nothing for her at all. Their relationship was doomed. But none of that was my problem anymore. 18-inch, don't think about them, I said, smiling as I ruffled her hair. Let's go home. Okay. The moonlight cast our long shadows on the sidewalk, intertwined and inseparable. The days that followed were blissfully calm. Every morning, I'd meet Hannah downstairs and we'd grab breakfast together. Sometimes bagels and coffee, other times pancakes at a local spot. Simple things that felt special because we were together. After breakfast, I'd drop her off at her parents' new startup. They were just getting off the ground, so Hannah was always busy, but she never complained, always smiling. In the afternoons, I'd often find a coffee shop near her office to read or work on my own plans. I didn't have much to do, really. I just liked being close to her. When she finished work, I'd pick her up and we'd go to the grocery store, then head home to cook dinner. Hannah was an amazing cook, just like her mom. I was her sous chef, washing, chopping, and doing the dishes. I was clumsy, but I was dedicated. After dinner, we'd take a walk in the park or curl up on the couch and watch a movie. Life was as simple as a glass of water, and it felt more fulfilling than anything I'd ever known. I put the $15 million in a high-yield savings account and barely touched it. Our daily expenses were covered by the money I had saved before the system. It wasn't a lot, but it was more than enough. 19, Hannah knew I had money, but she never asked for anything. She still wore simple clothes from the Gap, used drugstore skincare products, and her favorite weekend activity was going with me to Target. I knew this was the life I wanted. Not extravagant wealth or dramatic passions, but this steady, quiet companionship. Of course, life is never completely quiet. One Saturday, Hannah and I were at the mall when we ran straight into Victoria and Julian. The moment Victoria saw us, her eyes turned red, as if she'd been personally attacked. She tightened her grip on Julian's arm, puffed out her chest, and said in a mockingly sweet voice, "Well, well, if it isn't Caleb. Is this the kind of place you hang out in now that you've been dumped?" I ignored her, trying to steer Hannah away, but Victoria blocked our path. "What's the matter? Cat got your tongue. Are you embarrassed to be seen with this?" Plain Jane. Hannah's face paled, but she lifted her chin and looked right at Victoria. "You could try being polite. Was I talking to you?" Victoria shot Hannah a look of pure disdain. "Where did he even find you? Who gave you permission to speak?" "Watch your mouth," I said, stepping in front of Hannah. My voice was ice. "Where we go and who I'm with is none of your business. Now, please, get out of our way. Caleb, don't push your luck." Victoria's face flushed with anger. "Who do you think you are now? You're just a replacement I threw away. How dare you speak to me like that?" "What I am is none of your concern," I replied calmly. "But you're with Mr. Croft now. You should probably stop obsessing over your ex. It's not a good look." 20. Julian had been silent the whole time, his brow furrowed as he watched Victoria, his expression filled with clear annoyance. Sensing his mood, Victoria's bravado deflated. She shot me one last hateful glare before grabbing Julian's arm and storming off. As they disappeared into the crowd, Hannah said softly, "She really seems to hate me." "Don't listen to her," I said, squeezing her hand. "She's just jealous." "Jealous of me?" Hannah looked at me, confused. "Yeah," I smiled. "She's jealous you have such an amazing boyfriend." Hannah laughed, the unpleasant encounter forgotten. "Come on, let's go get those strawberries you wanted." "Okay." But I knew the truth. Victoria wasn't jealous of Hannah. She was jealous of me. She was jealous that after she cast me aside, I didn't fall apart. In fact, I was happier. She was jealous that I had found real love, the kind of simple, genuine happiness she might never have. She thought dumping me was a punishment. She never imagined it would be my liberation. 21. The days rolled by, and my relationship with Hannah grew stronger. I started planning our future. I wanted to propose, pick a date to go to City Hall, and then have a small, beautiful wedding with our family and friends. I'd already designed the ring. It wasn't from a famous brand, but it was a custom piece engraved with our initials. That felt more meaningful. I imagined that after we were married, we'd travel the world. Hannah always talked about wanting to see the northern lights in Iceland, the blue waters of the Maldives, and the pyramids in Egypt. I kept a mental list, ready to make every one of her dreams come true. As for work, I planned to open a small business, something I was passionate about. Hannah wanted to open a flower shop, so I decided I'd open a coffee shop right next door. That way, we could be together all day. Everything was falling into place, so perfectly it felt like a dream. 22. Then, one day, I got a call from an unknown number. The woman on the other end identified herself as Victoria's assistant. She said Victoria was sick and wanted to see me. I refused without a second thought. "Sorry, Ms. Vance and I have no relationship anymore. It wouldn't be appropriate." The assistant tried to insist, but I hung up. I knew what Victoria was doing. Things with Julian must have imploded, otherwise she wouldn't be thinking of me. Over the past few months, I'd heard whispers through the grapevine. They fought constantly. Julian was cold and distant. Victoria was becoming more and more hysterical. It was all predictable. Two people with completely different motives could never last. But it had nothing to do with me. I wouldn't give her another chance to hurt me, and I would never let her disrupt the life I was building with Hannah. A few minutes later, my phone rang again. Same number. I answered, annoyed. "I told you, I'm not coming. Stop calling me." "Mr. Morgan, please, just have some pity on her." The assistant's voice was choked with tears. "Sir, she cut her wrists. She's in the hospital, in surgery. She keeps calling out your name, saying she wants to see you one last time." I froze, a knot tightening in my stomach. 23. Did I hate Victoria? It would be a lie to say no. She used me, toyed with my feelings, and trampled on my dignity. But did I truly hate her? Not really. In a twisted way, Her cruelty had set me free and given me the means to be with Hannah. Hearing she tried to kill herself didn't bring me any satisfaction. It just left me with a profound sense of sorrow. To throw your life away for someone who doesn't love you, was it worth it? Mr. Morgan, are you there? The assistant asked frantically. After a long silence, I finally asked, which hospital? It wasn't that I wanted to see her. It was that no matter what she'd done, a life was a life. I didn't want her death on my conscience. The assistant gave me the name of the hospital and the room number. After I hung up, I sat on the couch, completely torn. Should I go? If I did, would Hannah be upset? If I didn't, and something terrible happened to Victoria, could I live with myself? Just then, Hannah came home. Seeing my troubled expression, she rushed over. Caleb, what's wrong? What happened? I hesitated, then told her everything. Well, do you want to go see her? Hannah asked, her gaze calm and steady. I don't know, I admitted. I'm torn. Go, she said after a moment's thought. 24. A wave of warmth washed over me, and I pulled her into a tight hug. Hannah, thank you. For what? She mumbled into my chest. I trust you. I changed my clothes and took an Uber to the hospital. The private room was silent. Victoria was lying on the bed, her face as white as the sheets, a thick bandage wrapped around her wrist. She was asleep, but her brow was furrowed as if she were having a nightmare. Julian wasn't there. Only the assistant sat by the bed. She stood up as soon as she saw me. Mr. Morgan, you came. I nodded and walked to the bedside, looking down at Victoria. I felt nothing but the detached curiosity one feels for a stranger. How is she? I asked. The doctor said she's stable. She lost a lot of blood, but she'll recover. She needs to rest. The assistant sighed. She's just so foolish. It's not worth it. Not for a man who doesn't love her back. I remained silent. A few moments later, Victoria's eyelids fluttered open. When she saw me, her eyes lit up and she struggled to sit up. Don't move, I said, gently pushing her back down. Just lie still. Caleb, you came. You do still care about me, don't you? I looked at her, my voice flat. I just came to see if you were dead. Since you're not, I'm leaving. The color drained from her face, and tears welled up in her eyes. Caleb, how can you hate me so much? I don't hate you, I said coolly. We're over. I have my own life now. I hope you'll stay out of it from now on. No. She became agitated, and a spot of red began to seep through her bandage. Caleb, I was wrong. I know I was wrong. Julian doesn't love me. He never did. You were the only one who was ever really good to me. You're mistaken. 25. I looked her right in the eye. I was never good to you. Not then, and certainly not now. You're lying, she sobbed. If you didn't care, why were you so kind to me for 2 years? Why did you take care of me when I was sick and comfort me when I was sad? Because I needed the money, I said, delivering the final, brutal truth. The life you provided was very comfortable. I could have mentioned the system, but that was too outlandish. Money was a motive she could understand. She stared at me, her face a mask of disbelief. What? What did you say? I said, I was only with you for the money. I repeated, my voice void of emotion. Now that I have enough, I don't need you anymore. The words were cruel, but they were necessary. It was the only way to make her finally let go. Tears streamed down her face, and her body trembled. So that's all it was. That's all it ever was. Caleb, you are a heartless bastard. Takes one to know one, I said. You should have known this was a possibility the day you decided to use me as a stand-in. I stood up. Get some rest, and don't do anything this stupid again. Your life is worth more than some guy. With that, I turned and walked out of the room without a backward glance. 26. Stepping out of the hospital, I took a long, deep breath, feeling as though a massive weight had been lifted from my shoulders. On the ride home, I texted Hannah. I'm on my way back. She replied instantly with a hug emoji. Waiting for you. When I walked through the door, Hannah was on the couch. She jumped up and met me in the hallway. How did it go? It's over, I said, wrapping my arms around her. She won't be bothering us again. Good, she whispered, relaxing against my chest. And she was right. Victoria never contacted me again. I heard that after she was discharged, she cut off all contact with Julian, who soon moved back to Europe. Victoria, in turn, threw herself into her family's business, transforming into a sharp and capable executive. On the rare occasions we crossed paths at industry events, she would offer a polite, distant nod. The obsession in her eyes was gone, replaced by a calm, quiet strength. My life with Hannah continued on its happy course. I proposed just as I'd planned. I rented out the small park near our old neighborhood, spelling out, "Marry me," in hundreds of candles with the ring I designed waiting in the center. While I got down on one knee, she burst into tears and nodded, falling into my arms. "Yes, Caleb, I'll marry you." Applause erupted around us. I looked up to see both our families had been hiding nearby, their faces beaming with joy. Our wedding was simple but incredibly warm. To my surprise, Victoria reached out and asked if she could be one of Hannah's bridesmaids. I hesitated, but Hannah just smiled. "Let her. She's a part of your past, and I think she's genuinely happy for us now." On the wedding day, Victoria stood beside Hannah, dressed in a bridesmaid gown, a sincere smile on her face. She handed us a generous gift and a card that read, "Caleb and Hannah, I wish you a lifetime of happiness." Hannah and I looked at each other and smiled. "Thank you, Victoria," I said. "We hope you find your own happiness, too." Life after the wedding was even better than I had imagined. Hannah's flower shop opened right next to my new coffee shop. Every morning, I'd help her arrange the fresh flowers before opening my own doors. In the quiet afternoons, she'd bring a book and sit in a corner of my cafe, sipping a latte. I'd be behind the counter, busy with customers, but every time I looked up and saw her there, my heart felt full. Weekends were for family dinners or long drives out of the city. A year later, Hannah gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. She had her mother's big, bright eyes. We named her Nora, which means light. With our daughter, our lives became a whirlwind of happy chaos. Every evening, when I came home from work and saw Hannah at the door, holding our daughter and smiling, I knew that every hardship, every second of playing a part, had been worth it. Everyone has a past they have to move on from and a future they have to build. The important thing is, we had both found our happiness. And my happiness was right here with the two women in my life. One, the girl I'd loved since I was a boy, and the other, the beautiful proof of that love. I couldn't imagine a more perfect ending.